We are back. Morning. It is still Friday, February 23rd, 2024. This is the second half of the morning committee meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy, which came to Bill S-258, activating the management of fish and wildlife. And next up is Trevor Ball.
Can we wait for him to come back in?
No, just
Okay.
even.
All right.
Press on.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. My name's Trevor Bonnell. I'm from Danville, Vermont. I guess you could call me a dog trainer if you wanted, more of a hobby, but I train numerous dogs to find deer antlers and moose antlers after they fall off. I also have, hounds. And I'm gonna tell you a story. I started hound hunting, I figure at least 20 years ago. I started with some old time trappers in the area when I moved to North Danville from Barnet. Nice guys. Technology was a little weak. I had fun with it for about 5 years. My son was born and I got out of it. And the reason I got out of it was lack of control. And I'm gonna be honest with you, that was why I got out of it. I couldn't tell my wife when I was gonna be home. You never knew. We would be out till midnight looking for those dogs, and that's the truth. I was up on Standard Mountain looking for dogs half the night. So I couldn't guarantee my kid's basketball game. I couldn't guarantee anything that I was gonna be doing. Because if I went with those guys, I was obligated to stay with those guys until their dogs were picked up. Eventually I stopped going because my kids needed me. And then I went on, started training dogs, like I said, for moose antlers, labs. And then I got with Doug DeVoe actually and Travis Hall. And they asked me if I wanted to go on a coyote hunt. They knew I went before, and I said, sure. My mind was blown on how well behaved their dogs were. They could call them off that hill and they come walk all 4 or 5, whatever they had out, just come right down the hill. I've never seen anything like it. We used to see the dogs and they run the other way. You never know where you're gonna find them. You could only hit telemetry. You had a general idea. That's all you had. You were wandering around blind. I can tell you now, I asked those guys how they were doing that. I ended up hunting with them for a year and I actually got back into it. And I can guarantee my wife, anytime she wants me to be home, I will be home by that time. I've never lost my dogs. I know right where they are the whole time. And another thing is, anybody go watch a video on how to train a dog. Obedience is first. That's the first thing you train before you train your hunting dog of any sort, or even behavior. I mean, it's gonna be obedience. Another part I have with this, my family, I hear these things, people say dogs are wild stuff. I have walkers, pretty much a common breed in this area. My 8-year-olds play with my dogs. The neighbors' kids take my dogs and play with them. They can be unleashed at any time and they're going to be very well mannered and they are loving. I have 5 labs and they are just as loving as those labs, if not more. Also, I hear the control issue being said a lot, and there is control. If there's like a 3-strike rule out there in the real world, if you commit a crime, you're going to jail. They have control. The control is if I fail more than twice, say I run on your property. If I get told I can't go on your property and I run there again, I got 5 points on my license. Second time, I'm done. I lose my hunting license. I believe that's how it's set up. That is control. I have to behave myself or I lose my right, just like a criminal in the outside world. I don't understand how we don't determine that as control. That is a very motivating factor for me. I can tell you that. I'm an avid deer hunter, an avid fisherman. I don't want to lose my hunting license. I would say that could pretty much drive the factor when I run my dogs and where I run my dogs and how I run my dogs. Like I said, 20 years ago, I heard that man say quite a long time ago, I guarantee they were using telemetry. Telemetry was tough. I mean, it was real tough. You could not know, and it's not a training tool. Another thing is these collars nowadays are a training tool. I don't stimulate my dogs ever. I don't need to stimulate my dogs. And I mean that on my kids' life. All I have to two-tone and that hunt is over. It is over. I hear people compare it to an outdoor fence. I had a pointer dog. She'd blow through that outdoor fence all the time because she knew 20 feet past it, it wouldn't hurt anymore. The risk was worth the reward she figured. The hunting dogs do not feel that way. Because that's something, if they go 20 feet, they know they can get the stimulated again. There's no way that they're gonna keep doing it. That my dogs, they hear that tone, it is, Pete, what are we doing now? Time to get in the truck, and I don't have to leash them. They walk back to the truck and they'll load up. So, and that's my story. And I can just tell you that I definitely oppose, I'm gonna say this too, going to 258. You name one private entity that puts the enemy of that entity on the board to help that company, I'd love to hear it. That does not happen, and let's be honest, let's just throw it out there. Antis and hunters are two different polar opposites. There's no board out there that's ever been successful with its enemy on it. There's no way. Petroleum companies, there's nothing. It doesn't happen. You'll be out of business. So.
I have a question. So, when hunts involve traveling, can involve long runs.
Yeah,
So if you release the dog, mile zero, and now you're 2 miles down the road because you're sort of shadowing them. If you tone, how do they know, what's the thought? Like if it was to go back where they were released, or how do they know where you are?
how do they know where I am?
Yeah.
First of all, usually it's yelling. Yelling's good for about 800 yards, let's just say. That's a little less than a half mile, I believe. And that's if we got a clear day. If it's a windy day, stuff like that. But here's the deal. I'm not gonna let those dogs. As soon as I tone, I can train my dog to sit on tone. I mean that. If I have a tone, if I wanted to train those dogs to sit, say I tone them 3 times and I want them to sit, they'll stay right where they are. A puppy, I'm gonna be honest with you, a puppy's gonna take a little time to get used to that. But like any training, you're gonna get your dog stronger, but the tool that they are using now. I would have never got back into hound hunting if it was not for the Garmin devices. I really want, I hope they keep coming along even better than they are. But I have pretty good control of my dogs. I've never had an incident with anybody. I'll be honest with you. I'm in favor of everything that this board has done. I think it's fine that we have a dog limit. I think it's fine that we have a season. I think it's good. I think there should have probably been that there before. I have no problems with anything they've done. The only problem I have is to the state's financial responsibility. We should not be revisiting this at this point. We should be letting the rules that have been put out there prior to see if they make an adjustment that can help everybody try to find a happy medium. I mean, as a responsibility to the state of Vermont, there's a lot of money and time that gets invested in this. Give it a chance what you guys have already done. I do believe it. And like I said, as far as control, you have control by taking my hunting license. If I mess up twice and be places I'm not supposed to be, if I ran on her property or your property, I'm done. That is control. That's up to me to make sure that I don't lose my hunting license. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Give my best please to your dad.
Huh?
Give my best to your dad when you see him next.
I will. He was here the other day. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Next up is Jim Calchera
It's on
on
the
the,
phone.
I'm here. I'm here.
oh, I see, you're on a phone dialing in. So good morning, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hi there, folks. My name is Jim Calchera, and I've lived in Westminster for 33 years, and I strongly oppose S-258. I am a conservationist. I am a conservationist who traps, hunts, and fishes. These activities are what keep me whole. We, hunters and trappers and fishermen of Vermont, give back much more to conserve wildlife than what we take. Wildlife populations are flourishing in Vermont under the existing system of regulation with the present board and department roles and compositions. Please do not change a system that has worked so well for so long. Wednesday, I was speaking to a 93-year-old farmer who grew up and still lives on the family farm. Stopped in to show him the beaver I had just caught that had been flooding one of his fields. Told me he had never seen a beaver until he was 35 years old. Burgeoning beaver population is thanks to efforts in the 50s by the Fish and Wildlife Department to reintroduce beavers into the state. Highly regulated trapping season was established soon after, and that is how it works today. Trapping season dates and limits are set based on department input resulting from their analysis of data. The board then reviews and approves any changes to dates and limits. Please leave that process alone. It works well. Tuesday, I was up at the State House and I talked to my Senator Harrison and asked her if she knew what the opposition groups hope to accomplish with wildlife in the long term, other than shutting down trapping and other means of hunting that are so essential to my being. She was not sure, but said we all needed to work together. As a trapper, I know that we have given up much in the last few years, and now it's time for the other side to modify their positions. I told the senator that one area we should be able to focus on with our combined passions for wildlife is habitat. If we all truly want to protect our wildlife, then we should be focusing all our efforts on conserving and improving wildlife habitat. Exactly what our excellent staff of Fish and Wildlife Department personnel have been saying for years. Let's focus on what our professionals say is critical to wildlife, and that's habitat. Please vote no on S-258. Thank you. And I tried to limit my talk to a little less than 2 minutes, so I got a little bit of time left. I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents on the term non-consumptive user.
Yes,
That grates on me a lot, because anybody who is alive, whether they're a vegan, they are consumers. There's no other way around it. So that's my 2 cents on that topic as well. Thank
you. So you brought up something we've been discussing, because you're not the first person to say that to us. Do you have a recommended alternative language? You know, sort of the street way of saying it is hunters and non-hunters.
Yeah.
But we
Well,
have
I just want to tell you that most hunters and outdoorsmen participate in the other activities that were listed as examples of non-consumptive users.
For sure. Yeah, we understand that. Yeah. Mr. Senator White, and then we'll go on.
Thank you, Mr. Calchera. So we did in the latest draft of the bill, change it from the consumptive, non-consumptive paradigm to licensed and non-licensed. And I don't know if that helps articulate kind of the point you're trying to make, but we also have struggled, and I don't think anyone is intending to add a level of judgment to either category. So it feels like licensed and non-licensed is the most sterilized version of that. I don't know how you feel about that distinction rather than the consumption versus non-consumptive user.
Well, I don't think the language is going to make me change my opinion on how I feel on this. I feel that the board composition now is the way that it should remain. So
sure. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you again for joining us this morning. We're gonna move on to Wendy Langford. Langford.
Oh, I see Jeff. They gotta unmute.
And
Unmute.
yep, there they go. Your microphone, I think, is on. We'll find out in a second.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning for having us here. We would like to support S-258. Our draft statement states that we're lifelong Vermonters and Vermont landowners. We live on our land in Peacham. Our land is made up of sugar woods and a lot of cedar swampland, and the black bears seem to like that. Unfortunately, 4 years ago, we had to post our land due to ongoing problems with the packs of hounds and their owners. Unfortunately, Mr. Bunnell's well-reared animals were not the ones that were bothering us. But anyways, for several years, our early morning coffee time on our back porch has been disrupted by baying packs of hounds running through the woods near our house, and the trucks racing up and down our dirt road trying to follow them. This happens several times a week from June until late fall. We've had several unpleasant, disturbing exchanges with the hounders that have involved our local game warden. This situation has been emotionally upsetting for us, and our pet dog reacts poorly as well. As a result of uncontrolled packs of hounds running through our woods, it feels that the right of the hounders to be entertained outweighs our right to enjoy our land and our peace. We are concerned for our safety as the hounds are monitored for location, but are not under voice, sight, or physical control. It's been our experience that these dogs are not pets. They appear overstimulated and frenzied when they are unrestrained and running on our property. We believe this is a situation you cannot really imagine until it happens to you. It is very frustrating and wrong in many ways to be forced to participate in something we find so disturbing and violating. We thank you for listening to our comments.
Thank you very much. Next up is, Diane, Nurme? Or Diane, perhaps? That might-
No.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Dina.
Oh, sorry, here you are. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, wow, I really enjoyed this different types of testimony today. I'm learning all the time.
That's what we get, you know, it's like school every day.
Yeah, it's like.
Learning all the time.
Yeah. I can only say how I've done. I'm 71 years old. I grew up on Vermont farms. And worked from place to place all over the state. I probably worked in 80 different towns. So I know Vermont, and I also know that it has really changed. Things, you know, there's a lot of houses and places where there wasn't houses, you could used to walk through there, and there's roads everywhere, and things have changed. But there was a time that the legislature had control of making the game laws in the state of Vermont, and there were always controversy on what they were doing. When the Fish and Wildlife Board took over,
We're having testimony.
there were again grumblings. It was said that the experts didn't know a thing about wildlife. But I think they proved us wrong. They worked with us and they were patient.
Who are you?
And after the few controversial years, I've seen a tremendous change in wildlife populations and habitat established. And even despite the tremendous habitat onslaught caused by new houses, structures, and roads, they have been, I think the wildlife has rebounded in many ways. I'll give you an example. The first coyote I ever saw was in 1970. Somebody had shot one in Huntington, and nobody had ever seen such an animal. The whole town gathered, people from Heinsberg gathered, people from Bristol gathered, and said, "Where did this animal come from?" And since then, they proliferate. I don't know a lot about dogs, but I know that I've been with some dog people in Vermont, and they are in total control of them. I mean, I'd have to say, "Oh, I gotta go at 5," and they'd phone them off and we're gone. Some of my friends hunt bobcats for them, and some, I don't know too much about hunting coyotes with dogs. And I've seen dogs hunting coyotes in Shelburne and stuff, it can get a little bit squirrely. But I know that in some parts of the Northeast Kingdom, when you have a lot of land and not a lot of places where it's well, a lot of state land and stuff, you can run dogs more easily. I am a hunter and observer of wildlife and well manage it. Without this management, there would be no wildlife at all. And I can give you an example. In 1969, when we were on the farm, there was a tremendous die-off of deer. And from my stream, into my stream, all the way up to the other side, counted 40 dead deer, and they were all starved, and they were eating hemlock bark. There was no browse left anywhere. And I think the legislature had control of the deer herd at the time. And then shortly after, the coyote showed up. Well, maybe they knew something. Maybe there was just overabundance of deer in Vermont, and they moved down from Canada, wherever they came from. We are consumptive beings, and I just wanted to just say this, I think I've said it before, but in 1607, Samuel D. Champlain came across a large village of Native Americans that were stuck on the other side of the river, I think it was the Richelieu River. And they were begging for food. Champlain could not reach them across this turbulent water and left them to die, and he said they looked like skin and bones. This is way back in the 1600s, they had eaten themselves out of their own character. In 1970, the deer, 1969, the deer ate themselves out of their own territory. I have been in the woods all my life. I've been a logger. I've been never been a trapper. I never cared for it too much. But I've been a logger and I've been a hunter. And I love being in the woods. I've hunted deer all my life. I've gotten 5 or 6. I've gotten more deer from cars killing them.
Yeah.
And I consume them. And I've even been on horses where deer were impaled on spruce branches and things like this, where they had ran away from the horses or the dogs and that were with the horses and been impaled. I've also found deer wounded in my yard, which I took care of and ate. I think that the board has done a fabulous job. I think adding people to it would just confuse things. I would say that to have 1 or 2 people from the outside with POW or whatever to talk about non-game issues and game issues that they like would be good, but I know that I grew up with dogs on the farm. If we didn't have the dogs, we had a cow dog that protected the cows at night. We had a rabbit dog, which we used for rabbit hunting. We had a coon dog that protected our corn and our gardens at night. They lived right outside. Without them, we probably would have starved ourselves. So there is a bond between dogs and humans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Tristan Leggett. And not in the room, we're looking for Tristan Leggett on the screen. Don't see Mr. Leggett, so we'll go on. And if he appears, we'll double back. And if having trouble connecting or anything, please send your testimony by email or post. All right, on next then to Maureen Dwyer.
Yes, Emily Ruff.
Sure.
Don't worry about the list, she's on,
Just want to make sure.
yeah, she's on the other side. Yeah.
I don't feel the same way.
That's yesterday's. I couldn't print this one.
Good morning. If you could just introduce yourself to the committee and let us know where you're from.
My name is Maureen Dwyer. I've lived in Vermont for 54 years. I live in Berrytown and I am out in the woods 3 to 4 times a week hiking. I support 258. I'm a dog breeder for 26 years and have owned a kennel in Central Vermont for 10 years. I have done a fair amount of working with different breeds of dogs. There's a very rare dog who will come off a scent when called. They are highly adrenalized with 2 or 3 other hounds running alongside. So unless you are within eyesight, they are not going to come off the scent. Hounders who are 2 or 3 miles away will not only be unable to pull their dogs off, but they don't have any idea what their dogs are chasing or who. You've already heard testimony from people who've had run-ins with these dogs. We have been told that if our pets are caught in traps, that's on the owner, as there are leash laws in most towns in Vermont. So why are hounders allowed to have their dogs run without supervision and not know what their dogs are doing? Why can't hunters hunt coyotes without bait piles and hounds? Wouldn't that be fair hunting? My last point is that we cannot allow the recreational sport of hounding and trapping of a few place the public in danger not to mention the inhumane treatment of wildlife. Why should fishers, trappers, and hunters get to make a public policy that impact all of us? Wildlife is for everyone. We need to have democracy and inclusion in wildlife management, and S-258 offers that.
Very much.
Thank you.
Next up is Rick Reed.
Thanks.
He's got a mute. There it is.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. The floor is yours.
Wow, it worked. My name is Rick Reed. I live in Williston, Vermont. I hunt, fish, and trap. After reading S-258, I struggled to identify the problems it presumes to solve. I don't remember a time in my lifetime when our fish and wildlife was in better shape. They are healthy, abundant, and there for everyone to enjoy. Results matter, and we're getting good ones. And yet, this bill proposes to completely dismantle the effective and functional regulatory framework that got us to this point. I don't get it. Vermonters care deeply about wildlife and choose to engage with it in different ways. Over the past year and a half, there was a fair, inclusive, open process to address concerns about trapping and hunting coyotes with dogs. Concessions were made all around, and new regulations were created. Logically, we should give the new rules time to work and take effect. Instead, we're immediately confronted with S-258, which so specifically addresses the changes animal rights groups hoped for but didn't get, that it appears to have been written by them. It gives the impression that government can be manipulated by a select few and is disrespectful to all those who worked hard in good faith throughout the regulatory process. We're lucky in Vermont to have talented, nationally recognized state scientists who manage using the very best science available. The Fish and Wildlife Board provides deep, practical outdoor experience and wisdom. We have a system in place that works well for our wildlife and all those who treasure it. Politically driven wildlife management would be a huge step backward for our wild resources. Please don't try to fix what isn't broken. I believe there's a tendency in society today to try to impose broad-based public policy in response to extreme outlier events. I think your committee is making that mistake now. Please vote no on S-258. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Next up is Walter Medved. Morning, Mr. Medved.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Walter Medwid, and I live in the Northeast Kingdom border community of Derby, Vermont. In way of background, I possess undergraduate and graduate degrees in biology. For over half a century, I've worked in the conservation field and have had wildlife experiences that have shaped my perceptions in my position in support of 258. I'd like to share a few of those experiences. In the winter of 1995, I was in Hinton, Alberta, Canada, to assist in prepping the wolves that would soon be headed to Yellowstone National Park in Idaho to restore the ecosystem that was robbed of an apex predator for over 60 years. I spent a part of 2 summers in the high Arctic of Ellesmere Island to study wolves unafraid of humans with the United States government's chief wolf scientist, Dr. L. David Meach. I've been up close with black bears in northern Minnesota when I lived there with Dr. Lynn Rogers. I have fished for Arctic grayling in Alaska and the Northwest Territories. I've been charged by a grizzly bear 3 times in Alaska's Denali National Park on a solo backpacking adventure that turned out to be more of an adventure than I had planned for. I witnessed on the north shore of Lake Superior, the fall migration of hawks on a weekend and recorded well over 20,000 raptors moving through. More locally, I've identified over 180 avian species in my Northeast Kingdom backyard. I'm also an Adirondack 46er, having climbed all of the 46 high peaks on number 2917. My connections to wildlife and the outdoors go deep. For nearly 20 years, I've been a student of Vermont's wildlife governance model and the trends calling for transformation of that wildlife governance model. I've studied the Association of Fish and Wildlife Association's report, and I have a copy of that, and with the peer-reviewed published papers in wildlife journals that increasingly are covering the subject of transformation. I have come to the conclusion that the Fish and Wildlife Board must be eliminated or fundamentally changed. While it is often stated the board only establishes regulations on taking, the board does far more. Vermont's board establishes public policy on public resources held in the public trust and by law for all citizens. Its powers are unprecedented in our form of government. The board can unilaterally establish Vermont state policy that allows for the recreational trapping and hunting of bobcat, fox, allows for the trapping of river otters, and makes the determination that our apex predator, eastern coyote, should be managed as vermin, contrary to the realization of the ecological benefits brought to the landscape as the Fish and Wildlife Department recognizes and acknowledges. These public policies reflect the antithesis of contemporary ecological thought. Public policy made by a board that is unelected, unaccountable, unrepresentative of the people, and largely uncredentialed to make decisions that the department is saying are becoming increasingly complex. It's worth noting that Governor Richard Snelling pushed to modernize and professionalize all of Vermont's operations from boards and commissions to staffing in the 1970s. He was largely successful. However, because license sales were at their heyday, the resistance to having professional biologists make decisions about the deer herd was fierce, and the board ever since has remained an outlier, and the department would never come to have full standing like other departments. As a side note, it's worth noting that resident hunting license sales in 1977, Governor Snelling's first year in office, was 54,412. In 2021, the last year that I could find, sales in that same category were 17,431. Certainly a seismic cultural shift. 54,412 down to 17,431. This drop in license sales here and nationwide, and the National Fish and Wildlife Service has called it the long-term decline in license sales. The increased calls for change from the citizenry, coupled with the biodiversity crisis, Vermont has recognized nearly 1,000 species now listed as species in greatest conservation need, has not gone unrecognized by the Greater Wildlife Institution. The Association of Fish and Wildlife, recognizing these changes, convened what was called the Blue Ribbon Panel. It was chaired by the former governor of Wyoming. The report concluded, and I'll quote, "To remain relevant, state fish and wildlife agencies will need to transform their structures, their operations, and their cultures to meet the changing expectations of their customers. If state fish and wildlife agencies fail to adapt, their ability to manage fish and wildlife will be hindered, and the public and political support will be compromised." And it's worth noting that the Association of Fish and Wildlife, which the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife is a longstanding dues-paying member. And again, their interests are to serve the interests of state fish and wildlife agencies, has created an office to help agencies transition to a more modern way of functioning. Also, I'd like one other quote from a magazine. It's called The Wildlife Professional. It comes from published by the Wildlife Society, which is the largest grouping of wildlife biologists in the country. Their director of wildlife policy stated, and I quote, I think one of the largest challenges facing our profession is our collective willingness and ability to adapt to observe shifts in public attitudes and perspectives on wildlife management and conservation. End quote. He added about Fish and Wildlife departments. These agencies operate as an extension of the public's will and must adapt to its needs if they want to remain relevant and successful. The same holds true of the board.
Mr. Medwick, we're running long, so we can wrap up shortly.
Well, I've got so much more to say.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But you are gonna give us.
I will submit this. I thank you for your patience with me. If I may say one more sentence, sir.
Please, it's just, we're trying to be even-handed. It's up and down, and we're 6 minutes and 43 seconds.
Well, I have a habit of going along, so forgive me. I would just refer the committee to the Constitution, Article 7, which states the government is, and the board is a part of our government. The government is or ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people, nation, or community, and not for the particular emolument or advantage of any single person, family, or a set of persons who are part only of that community. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. And you will submit written testimony.
I will.
Have already.
And here's
Is this the
report.
White Ribbon panel?
And I'm sorry, I only have one copy here.
Right.
I will submit this electronically.
So we'll get some copies made of that. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Oh, I'm gonna give this, can we hold on to this?
Yes.
copy as this first? I'm gonna ask you.
Thank you, Mr. Medwick. On to Emily Ruff. Good morning.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear so many voices of Vermont residents today. My name is Emily Ruff. I'm a resident of Orange, Vermont. For context, I'm a botanist with degrees from 2 universities, and I relocated to Vermont about 6 years ago to steward a 600-acre conservation and education center here in Orange, after spending about 2 decades of my summers here in central Vermont studying the ecology of the region with a focus on rare plants and the habitats in which those plants thrive. The land that I currently manage is ranked in many landscape and species scale designations of Vermont conservation design as highest priority. And in my years of work here in Vermont, I've leaned heavily on the work of the Fish and Wildlife Department botanists, including the esteemed Bob Popp. I've also worked closely with members of the Non-Game and Natural Heritage Program, and I'm a graduate of the department's Community Wildlife Program Environmental Leadership Training, both parts 1 and 2. During the last several years, my legally enclosed and posted land has experienced trespassing by hound hunters on more than one occasion. The presence of these hounds moving through the sensitive ecosystems on my land threatens the rare plants that live therein. The department's mission is the conservation of fish, wildlife, and plants and their habitats for the people of Vermont. As a botanist, I see the lack of board focus and representation within my field to be a missed opportunity for the department to play a leading role in our state's effort to face the climate crisis proactively and effectively. I certainly appreciate and benefit from the department's efforts to catalog rare plant species, address the growing concerns of non-native species, but I personally don't believe these efforts go far enough or are included enough in conversations about activities like hound hunting and the ways that those activities impact the ecosystem. It seems clear to me without the voices of botanists at the table, we're excluding an entire swath of scientific input that's critical to the success of our collective efforts to conserve and manage wildlife and the ecosystems on which they depend. In these last 5 years, I've on numerous occasions submitted public comment to the board, to the department, and to LCAR on a variety of concerns around last year's rulemaking process on Act 159. In particular, I attended a virtual public comment period held by the department last summer, where a recently retired department leader was caught on a hot mic disparaging one of the speakers. I sent a letter to the board complaining about the incident and its lack of professionalism, and to date, I have received no response. I've witnessed similarly unprofessional communication during board meetings that I have attended either in person or virtually, ranging from eye rolls and snickers from board members to going so far as those same board representatives describing folks expressing concerns about certain hunting and trapping practices as bunny huggers. Listening to the characterizations made today by several of the speakers about folks with dissonant opinions, classifying all of us in the same group as anti-hunters, oversimplifies and misrepresents individuals like myself who are trying to engage in informed civil discourse over what is obviously a very complex conversation. I'm here today at the table as a fisher, a forager, a hunter, a scientist, a conservationist, and an educator. I'm deeply concerned that the bias of the current board prevents nuanced civil discourse around issues which don't just affect the 11% of folks who have a license, but affect all of us as Vermonters. The atmosphere of contention and condescension reaches beyond the boardroom, as one person testified yesterday, into social media, letters to the editor, and public persecution of anyone who challenges current board politics by those narrow cross-sections of hunter and trappers who are served by the current board. The fact that someone like myself would be pigeonholed as a bunny hunter simply because I have concerns about particular trapping and hunting practices that impact a greater ecosystem, or that I have concerns that my private property rights are completely disregarded for the sake of someone's recreation, as I watch these hounds trespass on my land, trample through high priority landscape, and destroy S1 and S2 classified plant species. This is all a consequence of contentious energy that begins with and trickles down from the very top leadership who have modeled the ethics of exclusion of voices in these management practices of our shared public trust. I believe it's my understanding that the board was developed decades ago for the legislature to shift the management of the deer herd. And I believe in light of the loss of rare plant species and the decline of things like the eastern mallard, we have to bring more voices to the table and ensure that all Vermonters are represented. To reference the comment yesterday, the question is not how well oiled the current machine is. The question is whether or not this is even the right machine for the job, and to that I patently disagree. If we can't engage our board in civil nuanced dialogue around these concerns, how will we as a state, unified across public opinions, ever be able to address the climate crisis that we're currently facing? For these reasons and more, I implore the legislature to support S258 and create an opportunity for representation that more accurately reflects the needs and interests of all Vermonters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruff. We're moving right along. I'm getting a little concerned about time. Next up is Beth Volker.
Thank God, I was getting molded to the chair.
So embarrassed. Whoa.
Good morning.
Good morning, my name is Beth Volker and I live in Essex Junction, and I'm happy to be here this morning to support S258. Background, I graduated from UVM in 1976 with a bachelor's in wildlife biology and minor in forestry. In my retirement, I've been serving as a wildlife transporter, taking injured wildlife from the point of injury to the appropriate rehab, where I've seen places in this state that I had no idea even existed. In regard to the current makeup of the Fish and Wildlife Board, I'm distressed and angry that as a tax-paying Vermonter, I am not represented on a board that has total control over the welfare of Vermont's wildlife. All members are either one of the combination of hunters, hounders, trappers, anglers, whereas my representation is one who wishes to simply know that our wild neighbors are here to be enjoyed and appreciated while living in their natural habitats. In addition, the board members have no real training in the biology, life cycles, biodiversity, or any aspect of proper management. True wildlife management and oversight belongs with the members of the Fish and Wildlife Department, a large number of whom have minimally a bachelor's degree in wildlife biology or related field. They know how to do the management piece. Therefore, I support a balanced board serving in an advisory capacity only, composed of not more than half hunters, hounders, trappers, and anglers. The other half ought to be more composed of more individuals such as myself, who are not in any of these things and who just want to enjoy the wildlife in its living, breathing form. However, for the record, I am not anti-hunting. If you eat what you kill, such as deer or bear, and you kill it quickly and humanely with a gun. However, I am totally against killing coyotes in any manner, including hounding and baiting. Why do we kill them at all? Simply because we have deemed them as evil. We don't eat them, and we also just take perverse pleasure in torturing them before we senselessly kill them. Therefore, I support the practice changes contained in S258. Thank you, Peter. And I will leave this here.
Next up is Rona Gable, who I think we have online. Do you have him down? Ms. Gable, good morning.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for taking the time to let me speak. When listening this morning to folks who have opposed Act 58 for different reasons, from conflating concerns around trapping and coyote baiting with ethical hunting practices, which no one is calling into question, to claims that the elimination of coyote hunting would cause unchecked population growth, when in fact the opposite is true. Killing destabilizes packs, causes more births, and increases the population, which is an easily scientifically verifiable fact to check. To claims that humans are often attacked by coyotes in Vermont, when 4 attacks have occurred in the state in the past 30 years. My brain feels broken by listening to some of this commentary. A board is structured to mirror the diversity of its constituents. 12% of Vermonters hunt, 4% of Vermonters trap. Wildlife management, quote unquote, is not about killing. A board needs to reflect diversity. It needs to reflect those who aren't in support of trapping and cruel practices, and the issues of ethical hunting and trapping and hounding and hunting with bait need to be separated. They are separate issues. It is possible, native Vermonter, I've lived here my entire life. I am from a family of hunters. I go in the woods 360 days a year, and I promise you, it is possible to bond, enjoy wildlife, and enjoy the outdoors without engaging in cruelty, without inflicting suffering on another living being. I promise that it's possible to pass that tradition on to one's children and to bond with friends and family without inflicting suffering on others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Laura Smith Riva.
Well, she's not, she's a lead.
What?
She's a lead. Yeah, she's not.
Okay. Then next up after that on our list is Faith Orton. Is Faith Orton online? Not in the room. Okay, if someone sees her, we'll come back to her. I'm going to go on then to Dwight Day. Who's next on our list? Also not on the screen, also not in the room, so we'll pass over and come back if that person is found. Perry Beede, B-E-E-D-E, could be Beede. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. All right, not here. Diane Hansen.
See Diane.
Also not here. Next is Jacob Klein.
We had it.
Hi.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Jacob Klein. I'm a resident of Richmond, Vermont, and I oppose 258. Hey, Becca.
Hey.
Me and Becca were on debate team at UVM. Yay, go UVM debate. And from a debate perspective, I appreciate this argument as maybe one of the oldest arguments ever, because dog hunting and humans is really, in some hunting circles, considered the oldest hunting technology. Like dogs have been working side by sides with humans for so long that a lot of we've evolved together, and I really appreciate that, and that's one of the reasons I oppose this bill, is because I think that hounding and humans hunting with dogs is a great thing that should be preserved. Of course, it should be regulated, and I do feel like the board has issued rules that are incredibly strict. And since the new rulings, we heard the commissioner say the other day that only 36 people have applied for permits, and there's been no issues reported. So I think there's a lot of new technology out there, and hunters are well aware of the stakes here, right? You understand, like, everybody who's coming into hunting these days knows that there's cameras all over the woods. There's cell phones. There's no way that you can just sort of get away with stuff without it having a ripple. So you really have to respect the boundaries. You have to have control of your dogs, and you have to be polite to your neighbors. Because that's the only way this is ever going to work. So I oppose this bill, and I appreciate you all giving me the opportunity to participate in this great state and the great Senate. I mean, it's really a good opportunity. I encourage you all, push this stuff back to the board, get the feedback back to them, and that they do need to work on maybe getting back to complaints or whatever, or making people feel like they're heard. But I do feel like the science is behind the board. There's never been a time where there hasn't been people hunting in Vermont. And before even Vermont existed, people were hunting here. And I think it's, we want to stick to the science and, even give a little, it is difficult to, imagine an animal getting hurt, or killed, but that is part of nature. And, nobody's taking that in vain when they're hunting. That they want every kill to be clean and humane. And they're not, nobody's trying to inflict pain on an animal on purpose. And there is a lot to be said with hounding too. You get a lot more control over your kill. Like you can, because the animals are not the ones killing the coyote. You are as the hunter. So you might just be scaring it away from livestock and sort of keeping it at bay, because we don't really want these wild animals to be living in our community right next to us. They're wild animals. They should be farther away. Bears are causing problems all the time. Dumpsters and people getting chased by in my son's neighborhood, chased by bears. And it's something that can be solved with hounding. And it's a great tool. And I oppose this bill specifically because it's targeting hounding. And I want to see that kept as an option, kept for hunters, and kept as a great tool that we've been using since the beginning of humans and dogs. And I would hate to see this Senate be the one that sort of pushes us away from it as a state. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Diane Baker. I think it's with us on the screen. Ms. Baker, it is your turn. You can turn on your mic and or your video. Ms. Baker, I don't know if you hear me. So we will go on, Ms. Baker. I hope you will come back and call on you again. Maybe you're away from your desk or something like that.
He's not identified. No, that's
Next name I have is just the first name, Trevor.
no Chris. Trevor is. Oh, Chris.
Okay, then I have Chris. So I see Chris's iPad.
That's me.
Okay, if you can, good morning. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
And you could give us your name and your place of residence, please.
Yeah. Good morning. First, I want to say I was there Tuesday, and I want to thank you, Senator Bray, for taking the time to meet with me in the hall. I appreciate that very much. So, my name's Chris Pritchard. I'm from Paulet, Vermont. I was born and have lived here all my life. I'm a certified Vermont hunter safety, firearms, and bow instructor. Done so for over 30 years. I'm also a certified level 1 and level 2 instructor for the UVM 4-H shooting sports program. For the last 15 years, I've taught the shotgun discipline at our local club in Paulet. And I appreciate you giving me this time to speak and convey my feelings. Based on the way this bill is currently written, I believe the board should remain as it is. 14 members, 1 from each county, and continue to serve as it has. At the present time, every county has an equal voice. I would like to see lines 7 through 10 on page 3 removed from the bill. Due consideration seems ambiguous and open for interpretation. What exactly does geographic diversity even mean? Line 17 through 20 on page 2. The original content of the bill should be reinstated. How can a board member effectively serve a county they do not reside in? What was the intent of this change? Eliminate line 12 on page 1. Coyote hunters using dogs are now licensed, pay a fee, and are required to register, conform, and obey the rules set forth. If they are not abiding by those rules, we should know, and they should be held accountable. What makes the bear hunter, rabbit hunter, grouse and woodcock hunter, or the wildfowl hunter who hunts with dogs any different than the coyote hunter that hunts with dogs? Which one of us is next? Have you determined that all these other types of hunting with dogs are covered by our right in our Vermont Constitution to hunt, but this one is specifically not? I don't think so, and I don't believe you do either. For years, we have entrusted the Commissioner and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to care and manage our wildlife resource. I feel they should be the ones to interview, vet, and appoint board members based on the requirements and guidelines set forth by the legislative body. They should have people that work with them in a cooperative manner, not an adversarial one. Political appointments seldom achieve this. It is unfortunate that they always seem to be agenda driven. I agree that Vermont wildlife is for all Vermonters, and with that being said, I personally have no problem with an equal amount of consumptive and non-consumptive users on this board. Appoint 7 of each. I don't think anyone can argue the fairness with that. I do, however, request consideration that it should become part of this bill. Animal rights activists must be disqualified from ever serving on this board, and this must be a part of the vetting process for the appointment to the board. Many people, including the sponsors of this bill, are aware of these groups and their conduct towards the hunting and trapping community, the Fish and Wildlife Board, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife and their employees. And they proudly and they boldly post this on social media for all to see, up to and including threats. This is not okay. They are disruptive, combative, disrespectful, and offer no compromise that deviates from their agenda. They cannot be trusted to act in the best interest of Vermont's wildlife, and this bill, as it presently is written, allows them to do just that. We all have the right as individuals to speak our mind and plead our case as you have allowed me, and that includes these folks. But they cannot and must not be allowed to sit on a board they have shown complete disdain for, demeaned, and even sued. To do this would be an injustice to all Vermonters and Vermont's wildlife. This bill as written only serves to escalate hostilities between Vermonters and create nothing but gridlock for this board, the department, and the commissioner. As I listened to the hearing yesterday, the most important thing I took out of this hearing came from a few folks on both sides of this debate. And that message was the need to heal this division. It is rampant all around us, and it is sad to see. I want to be able to trust my legislators to make this their primary mission when writing legislation. I fully understand the difficulty and the hard work that is necessary in order to achieve this. But this is the mission you signed up for and the result you need to deliver to all Vermonters. And that is why I cannot support S258 as it is presently written. This is not a bill about consumptive or non-consumptive, licensed or non-licensed. This is a bill as written that is about us versus them. And all Vermonters deserve better than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. And just one point of information. So, there is, if you visit our website, you'll see a draft strike all, so-called strike all amendment that proposes some revisions. We haven't formally adopted them, and, you know, we will be finishing the bill next week. But one of them addresses the geography question. So, I'm gonna own that one. You know, when I put it in, it was 444, that this made it vague about how to keep every county in. So one of the proposed revisions is to go to 555, one per county and one at-large member. So we make sure that we have that geographic diversity by county. So thanks for
Sure.
that. We've been hearing that thing, and we're making changes based on the testimony we're taking. Senator
But you
White?
do already have the geographic diversity with one member in each county. That covers the whole state. So I understand what you're saying. But
Yeah, right. Well,
thank you. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
Yeah, Senator White?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. So you noted a few lines and pages that you wanted to see changes on, but they're not, I couldn't relate what you were recommending as it is in the new draft. So I couldn't quite follow what the point was that you were trying to make on a few of them, because I couldn't line up with what the correction was, because we're looking at a different draft. So I'm wondering if perhaps if you're submitting written testimony, you could just look at the new draft and tell us what those lines are, because I couldn't track what your recommendation was with the new draft. Because you said you had very specific things you wanted to change, and I just couldn't figure out what they were policy wise based on the new draft. They just, you would have taken out things that did make sense in the new draft. So
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And next up is Alex Smith, who I happen to know lives in my hometown, Bristol. Alex, you live on Pleasant Street?
Yeah, the house with all the junk in the yard and five additions going on.
Yeah. And
Often a deer in the tree in the back.
I lived on West Pleasant Street. You came over and gave a little bit of a kayaking lesson, and then plunged on and did it ourselves. Not as nicely as you would.
Nice.
Yeah.
Pleasant Street.
Yeah.
Chris, I think you're still. I think you're still mics on there, Chris.
Yeah.
Mr. Pritchard, you're still he's gone.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so thank you so much for working me in here, guys. So yeah, as Chris said, my name's Alex Smith. I'm actually from the Adirondacks, born and raised, but have been here in Vermont, and I'm raising my family here, married a gal from Bristol. So my views towards S258 are kind of complicated. I think I feel a little apprehension, and I also feel quite a lot of optimism. But I also, as Chris has stated, I feel mostly that I have to acknowledge that representation of all Vermonters is something of a legal obligation of the board, and I'm glad to see that change. I'll tell you one of my best hunting stories here. I was hunting a tom turkey in the springtime a couple of years ago on a long peninsula that was bordered on its north and south sides by large bays. I knew he was roosting back in there because I heard him gobble when I owl hooted at him a few hundred yards away at dusk the night before. In springtime, a gobbler will, for reasons known only to the turkey, gobble back at owl sounds when he's on the limb there at roost. Good way to find him. So anyhow, I snuck in there the next morning, and I owl called again when he was in earshot, and he gobbled. And I'll never forget what happened. He gobbled at me, and then a loon called, sort of calling back to him on the bay to my left. He gobbled again in sort of response to the loon, as you know, shot gobbling back at other bird noises as they do. And another loon fired off on the bay to the north. And this sort of like ping-ponging thing happened back and forth for several minutes while these birds were calling back at each other. And the reason I bring this up is that I don't want to have the turkey without the loon. I want our wildlife department and this board to maintain what I think has already been a fair focus, but improve it on entire ecosystem health and on all the animals in the woods, because they're all part of why I hunt. And hunting is the most important thing to me in the world outside of my family. But I don't want the turkey without the loon or the coyote coming in to try to raid a nest while you're calling to them in the spring. I want to support a wildlife board that spreads its focus to all wildlife and complete ecosystem integrity. And as such, I support the fundamental premise of this bill. What's more, I implore my fellow hunters to tone down the rhetoric a bit and live up to our proud history as conservationists and stewards of the landscape. If we are good ambassadors to our lifestyle, we should have nothing to fear from input from people outside our ranks. However, I do have some concerns about S258 achieving its stated goals as it's currently written. My greatest fear is that my lifestyle and the livelihoods of the animals who occupy the woods that I love so much will be subject to the whims of temporary political climates and casualties of partisan bickering. I recognize that we're not talking about actual rulemaking positions here, but the board does have significant influence. I feel that some guardrails need to be established for the appointments to ensure that potential board members do represent Vermont's outdoor user groups proportionally. As I had mentioned in a op-ed I wrote a little while ago, I think, if 1 in 7 Vermonters hunt, it would be very interesting to know how many birdwatch, how many are wildlife photographers, and so on and so forth. And I recognize how much of an absolute pain that sort of data would be to compile, and how much overlap there is, and so on. But I think it would be critical to ensuring that this goal of diversity on the board would actually be achieved, rather than sort of opening the door for one homogenous board that doesn't represent a lot of the state to be replaced with another homogenous board that doesn't represent a lot of the state. Because as currently constituted, I love the fact that it's the task of appointing people is split up to 3 folks now. I think that's a great thing. But again, if the political climate is right for it, they could all appoint people of the same ilk, and then we wouldn't have diversity there either. I think also in sort of a further measure to ensure the apolitical nature of the board, I would love to see that some degree of bipartisan support for these nominees be required. I don't know if that would be through a supermajority in the state Senate or what, but forcing there to be some compromise between sides, between political parties, an agreement on these candidates would keep, I think it would keep radicalism out of the conversation on either side. You're no doubt aware that there is some significant fear amongst my community. I mean, the hunters and fishermen and trappers of the world, that this board will be stacked with people who seek to regulate something that they wish didn't exist in the first place. I hold no animosity at all towards folks who cannot stomach the idea of killing animals for food or sport, as they may see it. But I do share this fear for one primary reason. While we all deeply support a science-based approach to regulating wildlife, I think that's a thing that everybody likes to say. We're all on that team. Some of this does go beyond science. Some of it is hard to quantify. Hunting is incredibly nuanced and complicated, both in the reasons we do it and the way that it actually plays out in the field. And to legislate something like hunting ethics, for instance, from the outside would be really, really difficult. And I think it would be likely to miss the mark. I spend a lot of time talking with non-hunters, and I'm continually reminded that the picture in their head often just isn't the one that plays out in the woods. Sometimes it's more grotesque. Sometimes it's more glamorous, honestly, but it's almost always off the mark. And I think as a result, hunters are really needed to regulate hunting. Honest, invested hunters. It's also true that while Fish and Wildlife scope is way farther than regulating game animals, and as I said at the beginning, that's, I think, critically important to me. It's also true that consumptive use does still make up the greatest regulatory scope of their work, and I think that should be reflected in the board's makeup. I recognize that my place as a hunter and fisherman makes me hopelessly biased in this regard, but I can't think of a political issue that's come up in my life that I wish so deeply were not political. And I hope that the bill will be written in such a way as to ensure that the wildlife and its appreciators and shareholders, if you will be put before any sort of partisanship, and that this bill will be written in such a way that forces compromise out of all of us, because the aisle desperately needs to be crossed in this regard.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'll just respond with a heartfelt reassurance that the goal is exactly what we're talking about, a nonpartisan venue for discourse between people who have differing relationships with wildlife. So thank you so much for your comment. Actually, I saw your op-ed And I made a copy for people on the
Yes,
committee,
you did.
so we have your fingerprints as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right.
It had to be cut down from about 3,500 words to 800, but there's still some stuff in there. I guess. Also, is that Beaver Bob Galvin in the back there? Didn't I just meet you at a?
Just yesterday, yeah. Good to see you again. And we should chat sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
Happily still have the Vermont Small World Syndrome.
Yeah.
You're tender that you're on a debate team with.
Hey, I'm there.
Child, maybe your house and.
Well, we love it.
Thank you so much. So we have a few minutes left. I just want to check in the room and see if there's anyone who didn't speak yet. Okay, so we have 2 people, and is there anyone online? So Rona Gable, I think we did hear. Oh, no, sorry, that's a wrong name.
We heard from everybody.
Yep, okay, everyone on the screen we've connected with, we have 2 folks in the room, we have a few minutes, if you wanna come to the table, introduce yourself and jump in on our sort of 3 minutes, more or less drill there. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you for fitting me at the very end. I am Ann McKinsey, and I'm a resident of Corinth in Orange County. Senator Bray, I'd like to thank you for writing this bill, which I support. I'd like to speak a little bit about the area of public safety in regards to trapping and hounding and everything. When my dog was killed in a body gripping trap last winter, my initial thought was that there needs to be a compromise in the trapping rules because we're no longer living in the 1800s. And our laws need to reflect 21st century values. There's actually 2.
Yeah, I saw the second book.
Our state is changing, and there are a lot of Vermonters, over 70% of us who enjoy hiking and walking with their dogs legally off leash. As a result of the death of my dog, I have attended most of the Fish and Wildlife Board meetings over the past year, mostly remotely. And I have yet to hear a shred of interest in safety for the general public. It's really something. Traps are set on the ground in public places with no warning, no signage to alert hikers of their presence, and with a minimal setback from trails. This is not okay. Trappers create a hazard, and not only is it their responsibility to diminish that hazard, but they want to do that. In Corinth, where I live, one trapper very kindly puts up small signs to alert hikers of his traps. This is him being conscientious. Us non-hunters and non-trappers are not the enemy. I only ask that my right to recreate safely be respected as I respect the right of hunters to hunt. Even a year later, since Clara was killed, I still feel deep nervous anxiety every time my new dog goes a few feet off trail and sniff on the ground. I will never let her off leash, and that's a real shame. When the Fish and Wildlife Board voted on November 1st on Elcar's objections, they couldn't find it in their conscience to vote yes on a setback from trails for body gripping traps in water. We all know that dogs love to dip into the edge of a stream or a pond for a drink. This, you may recall, is precisely what happened to the German Shepherd near Castleton College last fall. Even the 100-foot setback for traps in picnic areas and playgrounds was a hard vote for the board to manage, Fish and Wildlife Board. It seems to me that in setting regulations for the board, priority is always given to the convenience of trappers. That's been my experience, what I've seen in listening to them, talking to each other during board meetings. The following day, after the Elkhart hearings concluded, the Fish and Wildlife Board lifted the ban on coyote hounding, having still not effectively addressed the issue of the inability of hounders to recall their dogs during pursuit. We heard Lori DeMuth share her story yesterday of what happened to her as hounds mauled her dog. Those 4 dogs were wearing shot collars. That was right down in Fairleigh, Senator McDonald, not too far from where we are. I don't pretend to know that I have knowledge of how Fish and Wildlife Department operates, but I do think that S-258 is a solution that ensures that we have a board that behaves in a responsible manner when making rules for activities that affect all of us who share the landscape. And that's it, thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you could.
Good morning.
Table and introduce yourself, know where you're from.
I'm Diane Levin from Moortown. And I am sorry about your animal. My suggestion is please stick with it, with the Fish and Wildlife, and stay present until changes are made. I support that. I hear what you're saying. And I did listen to the testimonies yesterday, and I hear some of the frustration from some people, particularly women who come to the meetings and feel a little iced out. Me too. But it's not a mixer. These hardworking folks have just put in their 8 hours a day, and they're volunteering another 3 or 4 hours to open up their research to the public so that we can hear what's going on, before they get home to their families and their long days. So God bless them that they work very hard. If you approach them, they're all very friendly. They're, they don't know what you need, so they're not coming to approach you. It does take a little initiative to see the commissioner, see the game wardens, see the biologist. Very open and friendly and willing to share information, in my experience. Like I said, I hope you'll continue your pursuit. My concern over the number of people, the 555 you're suggesting, makes me think it's going to be an 8-7. And it's always going to be weighted in one direction or the other. So that is a concern for me.
8-7?
That there'd be 8 people who are non-hunters and, and 7 people who are hunters, and any decision that gets made will always go in the direction of the 8-9, for example.
What is it now, Mr. Chair?
Well, it's a 14-member board.
14-0 or 7-7?
Well, 14 people generally, I think, pointed out in the hunting community.
Correct. And I agree, it's a lot of older white gentlemen. Yeah, I'm interested in being involved too, and there's a process. You have to be appointed, and I don't know the process. You have to wait until there's someone that seats available. It seems a heavy process in order to participate. Otherwise, you're just a listener. So I too am interested in being involved, but I don't know the process. It seems weighted and somewhat restrictive. So it's a new change. Now, my concern is for those who are non-hunters, I'd like to hear their transparency as to exactly what their agenda is and who is financially backing them and what their motivation is. So it'd be transparent. We as hunters are transparent. We enjoy being outdoors, and I can testify as I late into the game in my midlife crisis that the majority of these hunters have been overly welcoming and to me and want to see success. Now, how we define success? I can guarantee you I fail 90% of the time. And that's what I teach my children. You're gonna fail and you're gonna get up and do it again. What a great lesson. Now I'm not saying I'm the greatest, but I'm willing to go out there and enjoy the sunrise. What I'm asking of the non-hunters is come with me. Bring your camera. Shoot some of the wildlife with your camera. Come sit with me in a blind. Come experience this with me. You're more than welcome. Come volunteer at the Jake's Day for the children. Come volunteer at the Women in the Outdoors. Come see what Fish and Wildlife does for these programs. Whether it's, I've attended them. The fishing was the greatest. It was, they just bend over backwards for inclusion, for everyone. So, like I said, I'd like to know where their backing's coming from, what their motivation is, what their goal is, and come to the game dinners and meet with us. Yes, it takes some effort. Like I said, the women who kind of come to the board meetings, it feels a little, uncomfortable. So come to our game dinners and meet with people. Help volunteer. I am the ambassador for Hunt of a Lifetime, where we help children with potentially life-threatening illnesses to go on a one-time hunt of their lives. It's a big effort. We could use help. It's a big project.
So if they're saying they really want to be part of this, come volunteer. And show their interest and come meet us, as we would like to meet them. Thank you very much.
All right, that concludes our testimony for today. Next week, we're going to be, we will be doing some editing to the bill and then a vote. We're also going to be taking up another bill, just the committee, and we have the get the number right here, S-254, the extended producer responsibility bill for rechargeable batteries. Pick that up, and we know how to do more than one thing at the same time. We alternate. So we'll start that and we'll wrap the meeting next week. Everybody.
Thank you. I'm wondering, just not to totally shift into what we're doing next, but I would love us to cover the geothermal bill at some point, and I'm wondering timeline wise, if you could just communicate if that's on the docket coming up, or if that's post crossover with other bills potentially.
So delighted you mentioned.
If you already wanna answer that question, make a thing.
That's such a bad pitch. We have the RES bill coming, and so we'll attach it to the energy bill.
Great, okay, so that's when we'll have the discussion. Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yeah, given that we have such limited time prior to crossover, or things that can attach to with germaneness to another bill that's coming to us. Let's do more of our own things first.
And we also have the Be Home bill that eventually will come into our mix.
And it's here.
It's here, okay, and we're not gonna talk about pre-crossover, we're gonna talk about.
I think, we might have some more conversation about it, but we're also gonna be receiving the House bill. So there'll be a grand confluence of bills right here.
Yeah, the RVs and CDs.
RVs and CVs are also in the mix. So that's our last bill prior to crossover.
Oh, okay, great, okay.
1, 2, 3.
All right, well.
Congress to affiliate himself with Mark, so we should understand. Regarding the chief.
Okay, you are so affiliated for the record.
We've been hearing about it.
Yeah. I think we all find abstaining. Where there's a lot of